Welcome back to another special edition of the Fast Lane, previewing now week 2 of the college football season. Trey Lyle here with you, joined by the voice of the Troy Trojans, who will be playing, or hosting, I should say, the Liberty Flames in a very underrated matchup. Barry McKnight. Barry, let's just jump right into it. Troy with a great win against Southern to open up the gates. This is another team that's bringing back a lot from last season. Talk about what you saw from the team in the first game and what excites you about this matchup.
Well, the things that I like about what we saw in the first week was there was no letdown. It's a very, very fast team, fast offensively, fast defensively. They like to play fast. And Troy did all of that. The assimilated the new pieces in the offense really well. There's not many. So many people are back from last year because of the COVID year. There's some sixth-year seniors because of that. So a lot of known commodities, but there were a couple of questions, to be honest, about some of the new people, most notably the new starting quarterback, Taylor Powell, transfer from Missouri. I thought he looked like a 3 or 4 year starter for Troy. He handled things really well, the pace of the game, what Coach Lindsey wanted, and defensively, probably the most encouraging thing for Troy fans was the way Troy took care of things defensively. Southern absolutely is not the caliber of offense that Troy is facing at that Saturday. But I thought that the team speed, the depth that Troy had defensively was impressive. And I think hopefully if they can replicate that down the year, then that will serve Troy very, very well. But again, that was against Southern. And believe me, Southern is not Liberty.
Yeah, very much so. But it similar to the Campbell game for Liberty, you want to get that win. You want to kind of work the kinks out because, in my opinion, for Liberty, this is one of the most underrated matchups they have. Troy's been a program that's been able to knock off big teams. I mean, very few teams in the country can ever say in their history they went into Death Valley and beat LSU, and Troy is one of them. And so, obviously Liberty has the Ole Misses of the world later in the season, but talk about how these styles match up, because Liberty has shown the ability to play fast, like you mentioned, how Troy wants to play, but also control the pace. Hugh Freeze, one of the best offensive minds in the country. This is definitely this could be a very interesting matching of styles in this game.
Gosh, there's so many different levels to try to take on the particular styles and matchups there because, Troy has, and I've been doing this is my 20th year. Troy has won some really phenomenal games in some big time venues. Troy beat Nebraska 3 years ago. They beat LSU, as you mentioned. We've had wins here against Missouri, against Oklahoma State, against Navy, against Mississippi State. But I do remember this. I do remember 3 years ago, a Troy team under Neil Brown that was an ultimate 10-win team going up to Liberty and taking on the Flames up there. And we absolutely could not stop a guy named Buckshot Calvert. And Liberty won that game 22-16. So, yeah, your point is well taken and well made that Troy has had some big wins, including some big wins on the road. But one that really sticks into our craw was that Liberty game from 3 years ago. Different coaches, both at Liberty and at Troy, and virtually entirely different personnel, although there is some that's still there. What I'm looking forward to is offense. The two quarterbacks, both of them have some similarities to them. Both Malik Willis and Taylor Powell, both wear number 7, both have a background in the Southeastern Conference. And interestingly enough, both have played against the teams that they now quarterback. Malik Willis was a quarterback at Auburn, played and got a touchdown run against Liberty one time. And Taylor Powell, I remember calling a game when Troy played up at Missouri, and he went 6 for 8 in the backup role. So there's a lot of things to like about this game, just in terms of the storylines and all that. But yeah, this is an offensive game. There's no mistake about that. I do like Troy's defense a little bit better than, say, I would have if these two teams had played last year, and certainly in 2019. So, to me, it's not the defense that's going to stop the other defense that will emerge victorious. It's the defense that will slow down the other defense the most that I think will be the one that ultimately leads to the victory either way.
Let's talk about the front seven for Troy. A lot of experience coming back. Basically, it feels like every team is bringing back at least like 95% of their starters, just the way the COVID year went, unless you're Alabama, but they don't need to. How important is this linebacking core, which is one of the best units on the team, probably the best unit on the defense?
It is the best unit on the team, and it has the best player on the team in that linebacking core, and in my mind is the best player in the Sun Belt Conference, and that's a little middle linebacker named Carlton Martial. We're going to call his name a lot. The Liberty fans, you're going to see him all over the field. He's number 2. He's 5'9", 215, and he's the leading active tackler in the NCAA. He's everywhere. He's all over the place. He also makes everybody around him better leadership and his knowledge and instincts. The linebackers include an Iowa transfer named Jaden McDonald and a Michigan transfer named Jordan Anthony. A couple of other really good linebackers. KJ Robertson can play the Will, can play the Mike linebacker. He also plays what we call the spear here, which is the rover. So he can mix and match all over the place. The front seven as a whole really does a good job in controlling the line of scrimmage, getting some pressure on the quarterback, including what we call a bandit, which is basically a rush end named Richard Gibonor, who's an Auburn transfer, played with Malik Willis at Auburn. But those defensive linemen really do a good job of keeping the O-line off of Marshall and McDonald and Robertson and Anthony, those linebackers who can really, really run. The front seven is the key to the defense, and to me, for Troy, the defense is the key to the team.
Do you expect some QB spy in the game, maybe from Marshall on Malik Willis? Because Malik Willis is one of the best players in all of college football. He's deservingly, around the first round in the NFL draft, and is the real reason why there's a lot of hype around this Liberty football program, and the expectations are the highest it's ever been for this football program. Do you expect some spy in this game from Troy, or do you expect maybe how do you think they're going to be able to contain and slow down Malik Willis?
I honestly believe that by the time the game finally kicks off, Carlton Martial will be able to tell you everything about Malik Willis, except maybe what kind of gum he prefers. Carlton's looking at film on Malik Willis. He's watching tendencies. He's practicing about that. Marshall is going to be on Malik Willis the whole game. And if you had to try, I guess, boil down the essence of this game, really the keys to this game, I think there are 2 of them. Number 1 is just the individual matchup, Malik Willis and Carlton Martial. Hugh Freeze is terrific at game planning and scheming. He's also very good about taking the best thing a defense does away from that defense. So that'll be a matchup. Willis is bigger than Carlton, is bigger than Marshall. He's probably a little bit faster than Marshall, but Carlton has such great instincts and such great tendencies and is such a sure tackler. That's going to be a big matchup. The other one that I think is a really big matchup is going to be the running game for Troy. Got to control the line of scrimmage, got to try to do something physically against a Liberty run defense that I think Troy feels that they can exploit some. So, 2 things to look out for. See how many times Carlton Martial is upon Malik Willis, and just see how well, look at yards per carry for Troy by the end of the game. If Troy is averaging more than 5 yards per carry against that Liberty defense, I think that plays into exactly what Troy wants to try to do.
Do you expect Troy, you talked about their fast pace, their fast offense. Do you expect a little more ball control with that kind of dynamic of an offense on the other side of the field?
I think so, at least a little bit. That's what really helped Troy in some of the upset wins against LSU and against Nebraska, is just hanging on to the football and keeping the other team off the field. And I think that's another big reason, like we just talked about, why the running game for Troy is so effective. Troy throws the football a lot. I think Troy averages, since Coach Lindsey has been at Troy, averages throwing the ball 55% of the time, running at 45% of the time. But this year's team, they want to run the ball more. They want to take advantage of what they think is a really good stable of running backs. Kimani Vidal is a really dynamic runner for Troy, great with yards after contact. There's a 6th-year senior running back back for Troy named B.J. Smith, who 3 years ago ran for 111 yards against Liberty. He was really the only offensive bright spot for Troy. Well, he's back for a 6th year. He is a really, really serviceable, really experienced guy as well. So, yeah, Troy will run the football more because of what you're talking about, trying to keep Liberty's offense off the field. And again, if they can control the game offensively on the ground, then they really feel good about their chances against the Flames.
Yeah, I was going to touch on the running backs, maybe their second best unit. You talked about Kamari Vidal and obviously B.J. Smith. Mm-hmm. The depth they have at running back. I mean, they're at least 3 deep. They're working on their 4th position, the 4th running back. How much of a luxury is that in this type of game where, the line of scrimmage is so important because on the other side, Liberty is going to do very similar things. They've shown the ability to slow it down and control the pace of the game, but also they can speed you up whenever they need to. I mean, Hugh Freeze is a classic for that. Yeah. And there may be no better offensive mind in the country than the guy on the other sideline.
Well, you look at the trenches. Liberty's got a jillion people back on the offensive line. Troy's got a jillion people back on the offensive line, including some really good ones. The running backs. Well, let's just say this. Last year, Troy was exceptional at pass blocking. They were one of the top-rated units in pass blocking in the country. Run blocking, not so much. This year, the accent is on the run game. There's a new offensive line coach. There's, again, some experience coming back on the offensive line. So, the running backs are going to, again, they're going to be critical. We mentioned Kamani Vidal, who I think is the next big thing in the Sun Belt Conference. B.J. Smith, there's a guy named D.K. Billingsley who 2 years ago was pressed into service and ran for nearly 1,000 yards when B.J. Smith got hurt. So he's a really serviceable back. Plus, there's another guy named Jamontez Woods that really good out of the backfield, really kind of dynamic as well. It's just a really strong running back room. Now, if the offensive line can open those holes in the run game, then again, Troy really likes their chances.
So obviously looking at the line of this game, -5.5, Liberty's the favorite coming in. This is the team hovering around the top 25. More importantly, over 60.5. A lot of points going to be scored. I won't let you get a prediction because you're obviously calling the game. But what are your expectations for this game? Are you expecting a very competitive one, and are you expecting something higher scoring?
Well, there's 2 things that I think are kind of the X factor in this game. One of them is Willis. We're not likely to see anybody like him the rest of the year in everything that he can do. And like him for the last couple of years or for the next couple of years. He's an X factor. You can play a really, really good game against him and he can still beat you. But the other X factor, I think, I'm telling you, this place is going to be a madhouse Saturday night. There's going to be a sellout crowd. It's Military Appreciation Day, for instance, and Troy has a big military following. It's a big military area down here. The crowd last week against Southern was electric. People remember the Liberty game against Troy several years ago. But people also, Liberty's a brand down here. This is something that resonates with the home crowd because they saw the 10-1 record last year, and they saw Willis, and they saw some of the games down the stretch that were televised. Liberty is a big deal down here. How much the crowd can affect the game, how much the atmosphere can affect the game is yet to be seen, but I can guarantee you it will crowd and it will be dynamic.
Well, Barry, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me this week. And how can our listeners, if any Liberty fans are heading down to Troy this week, how can they listen to you and your call during the game?
Well, there's got a 15-station radio network. If you want to listen coming down, it's 94.7 FM here in Troy. We've also got several other stations that are around the area. So on the radio, it's all over the place. Again, this is a big deal down here. Troy football is meaningful down in our little section of Alabama. And Liberty coming down, boy, this is one we've been marking on the calendar for a good little while, I promise you.
Well, Barry, I want to thank you so much for joining me this week, and we'll have more covering all the games in your area throughout the season. You're listening to the special edition of the Fast Lane on this podcast feed.